This episode of Brains on Games is about building the best zoo. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we're going to talk about a zoo building game that really has kind of been the talk of the town. I'm going to say that this is more of a first look than a really in-depth review of this game because it is a very complicated one, and I feel like I haven't played it enough to really be able to tell you about all the ins and outs of this game. This is a game that came to me in the mail after I pre-ordered it, so nobody sent me this one. I had to buy it, but it's a beautiful game. You can just see from the box. Maybe you hear some things rattling around in there. This is a beautiful game called Ark Nova. Now, Ark Nova is a game for between 1 and 4 players, so there is a solo version if you just want to puzzle it out all by yourself, but you can play with up to 4 people. It's a game for kids age 14 and up. It is a complicated game, so it is definitely more for the older crowd, and it's a game that you can play in 90 minutes if you know what you're doing. It can go up to 150 minutes. I think we played for over 2 hours the first time we played this game. Let's take a deeper look at Ark Nova. Ark Nova is a complex, heavy game. That's why it's for older people, and there are a lot of components. It has a big footprint on the table. I've got a portion of it set up here. There's a 3-foot long board that I didn't even bring out. I'll have to show you that in a picture that you'll be able to see on the screen. That board has the spaces for your scoring counters and your reputation counter, and the big deck of cards and the marketplace that you're going to draft those cards from. There are a lot of cards in this stack. There's all different kinds of animals. I think there's over 200 cards altogether. There are animals, there are sponsors and different kinds of employees or assistants that you might have at the zoo that are going to give you some bonuses or extra points. There are conservation projects that you can get involved in, like releasing animals back out into the wild, which are all going to help you earn some points at the end of the game. And what you're trying to do here is build the best zoo that has a lot of appeal, meaning that you're going to have lots of customers that are going to earn you some money at the end of every round, but also that you're engaging in a lot of different conservation projects that are protecting animals, bringing them back into the wild. And the way that it works is that you're going to count up victory points, but it's the difference between your conservation counter on that track and your appeal. So you might end up, in the first game that I played, I ended up with negative points at the end. So you might play a game for 3 hours and wind up with 4 points. If you're lucky, 4 points. You might have negative points at the end of the game. So there are the points that are related to those 2 tracks, the appeal track and the conservation track. There are also points that are related to some end game bonuses that you can get. You're going to have some secret objectives that are hidden from the other players. So, for example, this card, you're going to draw from a deck of these end of game bonuses. This card gives you bonuses for attaching certain parts of the map on your zoo. If you've attached rocks together, you're going to get some extra points. If you attach the bodies of water, you're going to get some extra points. That's an architectural zoo. There are 3 boards that you're going to be concentrating on when you're playing this game, so there is a lot to keep track of. Each player is going to have a board like this with a map of their zoo, and the maps are all different, and the maps have different abilities and give you different points for doing different things. You're also going to have this board down here, which is your association board, where you can place these little association meeples in order to partner with another zoo around the world. That's going to make it easier for you to buy animals and put them in your zoo from certain continents. You can partner with universities, this is a very important one, honestly, because the universities might allow you to have a larger hand size or give you a better reputation, which allows you to choose a wider variety of cards. You can also participate in those conservation projects. That's going to be very important because, like I said, you're going to be looking at the difference between your conservation tracker and your appeal tracker on that victory point counter. So these are all very important. And you're also going to be focusing on adding enclosures and adding animals to your zoo. Hand management is a super important element of this game because you start the game with a hand size of only 3. So you might be drawing up some cards along the way. There is an action that allows you to draw cards, But when it comes to the end of the round, you're going to be discarding down to a hand size of 3. Now, one of the universities, this one right here, allows you to increase your hand size to 5, and that is an important one. I race to grab this one at the beginning of the games that I play because I don't want to discard too many cards. I want to keep my options open. In addition to carefully managing your 3 to 5 card hand, you're also going to be doing some action selection. And Ark Nova has a clever way of organizing these actions and giving you some options in terms of how you're going to choose them. There's 5 different things that you can do, and they're going to be beneath your player board on these spaces numbered from 1 to 5, and the numbers show the strength of the action. So if I have animals way down here at the number 1, I can't even play an animal when this card is here at the beginning. I need to do something else first. Here we've got a build action at a strength of 2. Now I could pay 2 coins per hex to place an enclosure somewhere on my zoo. Now it has to be touching enclosures that you've already placed, but this is a little tiny one that only has room for maybe a small animal that doesn't need a great big enclosure. If I chose this build action, I would put the hexes, the enclosure somewhere on my zoo, touching an enclosure that already exists, or here, this is where we start at the beginning, down here in the corner. Then I take that action out, and the other actions move up, and build goes down to number 1. So I think this is clever. Things keep moving, and you might be waiting to take an action until it starts to move a little bit further. I might take this association action only so that I can move my sponsorship action up higher and play some more sponsor cards. So you can build enclosures, which will allow you to add animals to your enclosures. And if I did have an animal that could fit in this little enclosure, I would flip it over like this, and then I put the animal card into my tableau. If you had a card like this, you need to have the sponsor action at strength 5. Then you could play this into your zoo, and those are native lizards. You are going to get some bonuses for connecting the rock spaces on your map here. And there you get an instant bonus, and then you're going to get an end of game bonus at the end. You might be able to take a conservation action. So that's an association action where if you've got an association action of strength 5, you could, in this case, for Blue Mountains National Park, you could release an animal into the wild, an animal with the Australia icon. And if you release an animal from an enclosure of size 4 or greater, that's going to give you 5 conservation points. So a large animal being released back into the wild. It also gives you a reputation for having that card in your zoo. So there's this engine that's building up, and certain more powerful cards have to be played when the action card is farther along on your board and has a higher number. You could draw some cards, and that's going to be more powerful the higher up it is. If it's all the way up here at strength 5, I can either draw 3 cards from the deck and discard 1, or I can choose any one of the cards in the marketplace and draft that into my hand. Each of these actions is also upgradable. So the build action, the basic build action, is one where you just pay 2 per hex and then you build an enclosure in your zoo. But once you flip it over, you could build more than 1 enclosure if you have enough money on the same turn, on the same action. It definitely makes things more efficient. So you're doing that hand management, you're doing some tile placement and trying to figure out how to best optimize the space in your zoo. There are some spaces here that you might want to cover in order to get some bonuses as you play. You're doing some action selection and choosing how to upgrade your engine. You're putting some cards into a tableau that's also going to give you some bonuses at the end of the game or instantly as soon as you play them. You might be doing some set collection because you're working towards a certain conservation project and you want to have a large animal or multiple animals of a certain kind in your zoo so that you can maximize the number of points that you're going to get when you play that conservation card. There's some set collection. Like I said, my son was playing all of these reptiles again and again and again because he had a herpetologist and that was going to give him some bonuses. So there's just such a combination of different things happening here, along with the fact that the zoo mats are all different. Each one has some different ability that it might give you. There's a lot going on in this game and a lot to keep track of. It's hard for me to even keep it all in my head straight so that I can talk to you about it. This is the first animal themed game I think I've played in quite a while. Maybe Go Cuckoo was the last game that had this kind of animal theme. That's my question this episode. What is your favorite animal themed game? Because my kids do like to play games, especially when they were younger. They really like to play games that had some fun theme with animals or artwork involving animals. Especially, they like dinosaurs, maybe especially, but any game with animals was fun as far as they were concerned. So I'd love to know what your favorite animal themed game is. But I also want to talk to you about what skills you're building when you're playing a game like this. Now, Ark Nova is a very complicated game. There's a lot going on, and you can plan ahead and kind of figure out some strategy. Like I said, my son was lucky enough to get a good engine going at the beginning of the game, but there's so many cards and so many options. I mean, the stack is this thick that maybe you're hoping to get lots of reptiles, but not too many reptiles come out. Maybe you don't even see, in the next game, we didn't even see the herpetologist card. So it can be a bit hard to predict what's going to happen. You have to be able to adjust your strategy on the fly. And so it is a game that does involve some flexible problem solving or fluid reasoning. Fluid reasoning is a super important ability that we measure in our psychological assessments. It's all about being able to generate a strategy based on maybe incomplete information, being able to solve a problem that you haven't tried to solve before, being able to recognize patterns and predict what might happen next. So fluid reasoning is a very important skill. It's just maybe especially involved when you're talking about math and science, where you do have to work with changing parameters or incomplete information. But it is a skill that's definitely exercised in this game. I've started my first game kind of looking into maybe building up my reputation as much as possible early in the game. That didn't help me earn money until I could get some cards into my hands. So I needed to shift things and try and find some small animals that were inexpensive so that I could build things up, because I had these big cards in my hand I was hoping to get out, but that wasn't the best way to play it. So I had to adjust halfway through and put some birds into my zoo instead of the larger animals that I was trying to get. It's also a game that involves some spatial skills. You've got the zoo map over here, and you are trying to maximize things and place your animals in certain areas so that you can, place the animals in your zoo that you want to place. You need to have the right enclosures in the right spaces, but you want to be able to earn the most money. You might want to be able to connect certain spots on your map. You want your actions to be efficient. So if I was able to put another enclosure over here, I would earn a reputation point, which is going to allow me to get some better cards maybe later on in the game. You might be able to earn some of the boards, earn you some money, or here you could earn one of those little X tokens if you're able to cover up this spot. Plus, the maps have individual player powers. So I think on this one, you can, if you're placing enclosures beside this symbol, you get a larger capacity, +2 capacity, because you've got big outdoor spaces in your zoo. So you're doing that flexible problem solving, that fluid reasoning, you're invoking those spatial skills. I sometimes had a hard time figuring out how to fit some of these big enclosures onto the map once things got crowded without covering up a space like these rocks that I'm not supposed to cover up. So sometimes my son and I were both looking to find the best spot to place those pieces, which, it was fun. But boy, I wasn't the best puzzle solver maybe in my first go around at this game. You're also doing planning, you're budgeting your money. Like I said, you can't really plan ahead too much because the cards are so variable and there's so many of them, but you do have to plan. You are trying to maximize efficiency with your turns and to work towards at least some short-term goals. Oh, I've got this card in my hand, but I need like 3 different things to happen in order to be able to play it. And if you're planning and budgeting and trying to be efficient and tackling things in an organized way, of course, that's an example of the executive functioning skills, the ability to work towards a goal. And working memory is an example of an executive functioning skill. And I found I was really struggling to keep up sometimes the first time we played this thing with all of the things I had to remember. Working memory is an executive function, but it's the whiteboard in your mind where you keep information so you can work with that information. And here you've got to keep track of all the symbols in your zoo, because you might want to play that tortoise and you need to have certain symbols in order to do that. You need to have the enclosure in order to do that. You need to have enough money in order to play that animal. So just to play one card from your hand, there might be 4 different things that you have to look for in order to determine if it's going to be a valid play. And we would find ourselves at first kind of stumbling a little bit because we would forget one of the symbols, or we wouldn't have counted everything up right, or the round would end just before. Oh, my goodness, there's a lot of things to keep track of. So it's a good exercise in terms of building up that whiteboard in your mind. Now, you do also get some information about the animals. There's a little bit of information on the cards. You get the animal's scientific name. You get to find out where they live, well, what continent they live on. Not a lot of detailed information there, but what continent they live on. And you find out whether they're endangered or not. Those animals that are endangered might give you more appeal. They might give you more conservation points by looking after them in your zoo. Final thoughts about Ark Nova. Remember, this is a first impression, so my final thoughts might change once I've played 4 or 5 more games of this thing. But we've got this great artwork and the animal theme, and both my son and I, as we were drawing these cards up, we were looking closely at them and quite enjoying all the different animals that we could put into our zoo. So we liked the pictures, and we liked these different animals, and he was a bit creeped out maybe by some of those reptiles, but it's a fun theme with great components and great artwork. And it's got, I don't know if you could really see very much on the screen, but it came with these organizers. They have lids on them as well to keep everything straight. So you've got some good organizers that come in there, and that makes it a little bit easier to get a game going. It's a game where you've got lots of decisions to make, and they're not always easy decisions. You might have a few different things that you might want to do, but maybe you don't have enough money, or your action isn't strong enough, or you. It's a game where there's a lot going on, but each thing that you do is rewarding you in some way. So you're getting something out of it. You might be getting some money by playing the sponsorship card and moving the break token up. You're getting some animals into your zoo, or you might get a bonus by covering up a certain hex on here. So there's always something coming your way, but sometimes it's hard to decide which reward you want right away. And you do run out of workers for that association mat. So you might need to get some of these kinds of bonuses to upgrade things and give yourself an extra worker that you can play with. Maybe you want to push things over so that the break token ends the round sooner, and then you can get your workers back from that other mat. There are a lot of decisions, but they're sort of fun decisions, and you're always getting something out of it. If there are downsides to this game, it's another one of those kinds of games where you're doing that engine building, that tableau building. You've got your own individual mat. There's not a lot of player interaction. There's not, at least in the cards that we came across. And like I said, this is a first impression. We didn't find other than, I can take a card that my son wanted, or grab that university before everything refreshes, and he wanted that one too. There's limited player interaction apart from the drafting. It is a long and complicated game. So in my house, it's not a game, unfortunately, that's going to hit the table that often, because it's hard to schedule a 2 to 3 hour game. It has to be a special game day. You don't just pull somebody aside and say, hey, let's take 2 hours of your time because my kids are working or they're at university. So it's hard to pull them aside, and to get other adults to take a whole afternoon, it becomes a special event, right? So this is a game that would be pulled out on special kind of game days, but it's not a game that you're just going to take out and play off the cuff, because there's a bit to set up, but really because it's a commitment to play it. It's a commitment to learn how to play it. It's a commitment to teach someone else how to play it, and it takes a long time to play, and it's quite complicated. So you have to kind of be in the right headspace and have enough time. I think it's a game that's going to be better at low play counts, so that there's less waiting time, because there's not that much interaction. There's no, when the other players are taking the turn, I might be interested in the cards they're playing and how they're organizing things in their zoo and the bonuses that they get, but I think that might wear off as I become more familiar with the cards and the animals and these different mats and their abilities. So there's not something that's drawing me in to another player's turn. I'm going to be looking at my own cards and thinking about my own action, and then just waiting. So that might be a downside as well, that limited interaction and the long wait times. Of course, more players mean that it's going to take longer as well. So I 2 players is a good number for this one. I might try it at 3, but I do feel like that might be a bit long for my kids. But overall, this is a game that so far, I have to say, I really enjoyed. I love the action selection. I love the animals and the theme. I think it's kind of fun to try and maximize the benefits of how you place things into your zoo, and I haven't even learned about all the different abilities of the different player mats. I might have a favorite eventually. I think that the variable round length is fun. I really like this action selection business and how I choose one and then that goes back to number one and everything else shifts forward and becomes stronger. So you have to think about the order that you're going to do those actions in. This is a game that I played it once and I immediately reset it to get ready to play another game. And it's still, the big board is still set up on my game table right now. I want to get my other son over here so I can show him how to play it. So, there are some downsides, but this is a kind of game that I like. But because it's so long, it's only going to come out on special occasions, unfortunately. I have a feeling some of my friends who watch this video might be itching to come over and give this one a try. And that, in a nutshell, that's my first impressions of Ark Nova. If you have any questions or suggestions, if you want to tell me what your favorite animal-themed game is, you can leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.